And now for analysis of the big stories of the day. You might have heard earlier on the program about a rather depressing warning coming from the World Health Organization about the resurgence of COVID and the arrival of new, more battle-hardened strains of the disease. And also, of course, the upcoming ballot in Osun State this weekend and what the implications might be for the main event in 2023. And then the other simmering stories, including the choice of candidates and running mates on how that is threatening to upset the delicate political balance in Nigeria. Well, for analysis of everything you've heard on the program and more, I'm joined now from our Lagos studios by the author and columnist, Dr. Dakuku Peterside, and here in Abuja by the public affairs analyst, Dr. Armstrong Ume Columnist. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me come to you first in Lagos, Dr. Dakuku Peterside. We've had the warning from the WHO and from WAHO about the new wave of COVID, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control raising the alarm after COVID infections jumped more than 300% in the last month. How do you assess the Nigerian government's approach to this new wave and these new strains of COVID?
Well, good evening, viewers. I'm concerned for a number of reasons. The first is that vaccination rate has dropped to all-time low in Nigeria, and so Nigerians are not up in their guards against COVID. Two is the culture of mask wearing is almost being erased, it's almost being forgotten, and there's no attempt to raise awareness that there is still COVID around, and the fact that you've taken the vaccination does not mean that you will not get infected with COVID. It simply means that your case may not be fatal. So that, again, is a challenge. Then three is the fact that we're not conscious of the new variants, whether it's BA5, BA75, or any of the new variants. Studies are not being conducted to the best of my knowledge, and we're still stuck to the old knowledge of what all the information we have about COVID. That's worrisome. Then, whether we are putting enough guards in place, to safeguard our people on the new variants. If you go to many centers, people are not coming forward to be tested for COVID. Even when they have signs or symptoms of COVID, people prefer to undergo some form of local treatment on their own without going for tests. So, I'm worried about the awareness, about consciousness of the existence of COVID, or the fact that COVID is still very much with us. That's my real concern. So I don't think government is doing much. I don't think the agencies are doing much. They may be doing so much, but it's not to the awareness of the public or to the knowledge of the public.
Here with us, Dr. Peterside. Let me bring you in, Dr. Armstrong Ume Columnist. Thank you for your patience there. I suppose part of the problem that they face in their response is that, as Dr. Peterside was pointing out there, awareness seems to be disappearing, and we have very poor vaccination levels here in Nigeria, don't we?
You're right. The issue is that overall, a lot of people are under the belief that COVID is over, and a lot of people have left their guards down. So again, it comes back to the point of awareness, that despite the fact that there was a reduction in the number of infections, the number of hospitalizations, the fact is that the disease is still around and that we need to continuously take precautions. But again, it means that all the different agencies and all the stakeholders that are responsible for raising the awareness cannot relent in their efforts in doing so. And it's a collective effort. It is not just about government. I believe that all the other stakeholders, the media houses, the different communities where people gather, have a responsibility to continuously raise the level of awareness and let people know that this is not over yet, and that there are new strains. They may not have the same level of severity, but they're still infectious, and it depends on your vulnerability. I mean, if you're older, then of course you're a lot more vulnerable than the younger people, and so you're not out of the woods yet. And I think that is key.
That's a very good point. And let me return to you, Dr. Peterside in Lagos. Following up from what Dr. Takang was saying there, is there a sense also that people in this part of the world feel that there might be a lot of COVID around, but that they are rightly or wrongly probably unlikely to die from it?
Yes, that's very correct. That's the general feeling. Even when we had the first 2-3 waves of COVID, the fatality rate in this part of the world was quite low. That's understandable. And a lot of reasons have been attributed, or it's been attributed to a lot of reasons, including the fact of our climatic conditions, which may not be very correct, it's not scientific. Aside from that, you also know that our vaccination rate is one of the lowest in the world, regionally speaking, or region compared to region. And unfortunately, we still do not have high fatality rate. But it doesn't take away the fact that there are new strains for which the impact is unpredictable. That's, for me, that's a concern. We have not come to understand fully the way COVID is evolving, especially the new subvariants and its impact and the fatality rate. And therefore, we must be on our guard. And so for government agencies, and I agree with him, that we must continue to raise awareness that we still have COVID with us, and that we can predict the fatality rate, and there are a lot of uncertainty around it, and that we must continue to be on our guard. We must continue to do those things that the experts recommend we do, including wearing face masks, being conscious of the way we gather. So I totally subscribe to the fact that we must continue to raise awareness, and that we cannot rule out maybe the fact that we can have high fatality rate, because we're still yet to understand fully the nature of the new emerging subvariants.
Yes, that's a very good point. And on that note, let's move on to the other big story of the day, of the week, the Osun State governorship election, which is coming up this weekend. It's the last poll before 2023. Dr. Armstrong Ume Takang, to what extent do you think it can be seen as a bellwether for the presidential election?
In a number of ways. There are different dimensions to look at it. I think the first one clearly is the fact that because you have a single state in which an election is being conducted, it provides an opportunity for a pilot. One is that the INEC has a chance to really test some of the improvements in the processes that they would use to conduct the elections, in terms of the sensitivity of the materials, the transportation of the materials, and also where they are keeping the sensitive materials. Instead of at CBN, they are using their own facility to do that. I think that's one of the test points. The second aspect of it is really the fact that there has been an upsurge or an increased interest of registration by a lot of people who are voting for the first time, and they believe that this is an opportunity for them to have a say as to who becomes their leader. It will be interesting to see whether or not the turnout, first, the voter turnout in Osun will be significantly different from the previous governorship elections. The second aspect of it is that the new parties outside the two major parties, it will be interesting to see whether there has been a statistically significant increase in the number of voters for those parties. Because if there isn't, then perhaps a lot of the noise in the social media is just really social media. As it is always said, voting doesn't take place in social media, it takes place on ground at the polling units. So I think it would be interesting to see that. But thirdly, in my view, is that it again really brings to the fore the importance of raising voter awareness and also ensuring that people understand the impact of their votes, and that if you choose not to vote, you have actually decided. right? So the fact that you don't show up to vote doesn't mean you have not decided. You've decided not to vote, and you should live with the consequences. When you don't vote, then you lose the privilege of criticizing whatever challenges that you face down the line during the next 4 years. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out, and I'm really excited, and I really like to see what happens next weekend.
Well, we're all rather keen to see that. And of course, the last time they had a governorship election in Osun State in 2018, Dr. Peterside, it was a closely fought ballot, and they had to have a rerun, and victory went from the PDP to the APC, which was very controversial. Do you expect that sort of rancorous competitiveness this time around?
I do. I'm expecting now. Osun has had a history of being a swing state, by some calculation or historical antecedent. In 2014, it was a hard-fought election between Governor Ralph Ariboshola and the current National Secretary of the APC. And the margin was below 100,000 votes for an incumbent, as he was then, as Ralph Ariboshola was then. He won with a narrow margin. Then, in the 2018 election, I think that was the last election, recall that the incumbent governor now won by 490 votes only. And of course, the first election was inconclusive. Then they went into the second round of election before his emergence. Now, this election is unique in many ways. The two candidates in the 2018 election are the same front runners in this current election. In addition, there's the Accord Party element, where you have a strong candidate on the Accord Party. Now, but beyond that is the fact that the presidential candidates of the two leading parties have some stake in Osun. Of course, the candidate of the APC has rightly said that Southwest is his dominant space. Then the candidate of the PDP, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, aside from the fact that the wife is from Osun, is also a major player in Osun politics. So it will be some sort of shadow election for both of them, and it will give us an idea of what the presidential election will look like. Then the fact of a lot of new voters will be coming up, will be participating for the first time in the Osun election. INEC will also have opportunity of testing its new technology, and Osun will be running election based on the new Electoral Act. It means there'll be a lot of innovations, and this will kind of give confidence to Nigerians on what to expect in the general elections of 2023, or what to watch out for. So Osun, for a lot of reasons, is significant. It's something to watch out for. It's something of interest, and it's something that I believe that the outcome will send a lot of signal to the Nigerian public and to those who are interested in the electoral process in the country.
That's an extremely illuminating analysis, Dr. Peterside. We will come back to you in a minute. But Dr. Takang, of course, talking about the big battle ahead in Osun State, the two people who fought that election in 2018, Governor Boyege Oyetola and Senator Ademola Adeleke, are back on the ballot. So a big fight is on beyond what Dr. Peterside was talking about there, between the sort of the candidates of the big parties. I mean, you've also got the people who are actually fighting on the ground there, aren't they?
Indeed, indeed. What is interesting is it shows that politics is not what happens overnight. You must have the staying power. You need to maintain the momentum. I think the fact that you have the same the same candidates that were up for elections 4 years ago that are still the front runner now says a lot. One obviously has the advantage of being the incumbent, but the other has the history of having maintained presence and also canvassing more votes and being the preferred candidate for the PDP makes it all very exciting. I think there's a lesson there as well that, you know, in politics, you don't just show up once and then if you don't win, you disappear. You need to maintain that because it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of canvassing, a lot of political will, social engineering to be able to maintain relevance, to maintain your constituency, that they're still enthusiastic to vote for you, even despite the fact that you might have lost the last time. So I think that the jury is still out. It's not as obvious as it might seem. I don't think that the power of incumbency would be as relevant here as it normally would be in other cases, because it could swing either way. And we've seen, like you know, Dr. Peterside said, it's really the fact that historically this has always been a swing state, and anything can happen. But it also provides an opportunity for the two leading presidential candidates to test their power and their prowess in terms of what might happen next year.
Right. So a big, major political test for the main parties ahead of the 2023 presidential election. Let's segue from that to the nettlesome question of the Muslim ticket adopted by the APC. Dr. Peterside in Lagos, what's your assessment of that?
Well, you see, I understand religious sensibilities and diversities in our country. But I think that the real challenge in the country today is quality of governance, not necessarily religious cohabitation. I don't think that's a real challenge in our country today. And I understand that there must be deliberate effort to accommodate our different diversities, but that should not be elevated above the real challenge we have today. And so we've had cases where we have Christians of all divides, Muslims of all divides, who did not deliver good governance and were insensitive to matters affecting even Christian leaders who are insensitive to matters affecting Christians, or Muslim leaders who are insensitive to matters affecting Muslims. Now, the challenges we face do not know religion. Insecurity is not essentially a religious issue. Now, the fact of hunger or poverty is not a religious issue. Now, all the challenges we face, underdevelopment, lack of infrastructure, lack of quality education, lack of social service, they are not religious issues. And studies and upon studies, no study has shown that there's a correlation between somebody's moral standing or religious standing and the quality of governance he or she can deliver. I don't think the greatest challenge we face as a country has to do with religion. The challenge we face today is the quality of governance, quality of leadership. I won't even say quality of governance, quality of leadership that we have as a country. And what should matter to Nigerians is that we have to make a choice between having a government that can deliver services, that can guarantee security, safety of life and property, versus a government that can guarantee freedom of worship alone. And if you ask me, my own personal preference would be to have a government that can deliver on the things that we average Nigerians expect, and we don't expect much.
Yeah, well,
security of life and property.
Right. Okay.
Social services, good governance.
Right. Okay. I think we've just got a couple of minutes left on the program, and I have to say that what you're talking about is clearly in an ideal situation, and Nigeria is far from ideal, which is why it's an issue. But I do agree with you that it really shouldn't matter, but unfortunately it does. Let me put this other question to you before we have to go, Dr. Takang. We've seen the Pan-Yoruba socio-political organization Afenifere coming out in support of the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi. How important symbolically is that?
Clearly, you know, it's symbolic in a number of ways. But before I respond to that, I think I want to really add to what Dr.
Yeah,
Peter
very,
said.
very briefly.
Very
We've got
briefly.
less than 2 minutes.
Yes. So the key thing here is that with all due respect to the importance of being sensible and being sensitive to the diversity, both religious and otherwise, of our nation, I think we need to be careful not to overemphasize on the religious dimension of things and forget what is really the essence of elections and the candidates, which is really about governance. Who is in a position and has a capacity to deliver the quality of governance that we need and make changes in the key areas that we need, particularly infrastructure, security, economy, job creation. I think a lot of our discussions should be centered on those issues. Who are the candidates that have what it takes to deliver on those promises for Nigerians? I think that should be primordial in our discussions. Coming back to the point you made, I think it's symbolic because, again, the fact that you have a group coming from one region supporting another candidate from another region, despite the fact that they have a candidate on the ballot box, speaks a lot, right? I may not understand precisely what is driving that choice, but I think it's symbolic in the sense that it says that this is not just about tribal sentiments or tribal inclinations, but the fact that people are free. It's democracy. They're free to choose whoever, whichever candidate they want to back. And I think it will make the elections very interesting and exciting.
And on that bucolic note, I want to say thank you very much indeed, Dr. Armstrong Ume Takang, who's here with me in Abuja, and of course, Dr. Dakuku Peterside, who was talking to us there from our studios in Lagos. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.